Hi guys, it's Miles from What the Fox, and today we're covering when a huge American city became an anarchist commune. Now, before we get on to the actual video, I've got to make an apology to you guys. I didn't really post, I haven't really been posting anything really for like a long time. I did have that video in July, but that was just to tell you guys that I will post more. I got caught up. Turns out I really like enjoy playing golf. Go figures. So yeah. Well, by the way, I've got really good at it too. Don't mean to brag, but yeah. How did this even happen? How did this huge American city in Washington become some anarchic Marxist commune that later, and for those unfamiliar with this is what we'll get into what happened later, got taken over. And I'll tell you who it got taken over by because it's a pretty wild story. So let's get into it. So it's called the Capitol Hill Organized Protest, but I, I don't know. It gets called by many names. No one really knows what to call it. Everyone just calls it either CHOP or the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, which it was later called to, according to Wikipedia, which is Chaz. So you can call it Chop Chaz. I'll probably um, um, choose between the two of those. But honestly, you can call it what you want. It was so many names. It was weird. Too many names. Um, it was basically this like commune that got like it got made and like and it just got settled in like 3 weeks. Um, it was in Seattle. It was as you can see by the middle most left. That's what it covered, and it started due to the Black Lives Matter protests in 2020, um, which started off as really like it started off as a peaceful protest, and then with some of the protests, it turned into quite violent ones, which I might cover on this channel later. But this was sort of one of the main factors why this commune was allowed to exist, because it was um it was just like a wrong had been done in like the community, and sort of like the government, even though it was like the local government, they sort of wanted to like I don't know, sort of apologize for that, but they'd done it in a very, I'd say, bad way by evacuating all the police. Um, I'll go into why I think this Chaz chop it it hurt it hurt the regular people. It hurt the working class black people living in the area. It's just yeah well after George Floyd um after George Floyd got killed and the protests. It was this commune. It was an organised protest at first, and then it was a commune. It evolved really weirdly. It started. It was established June 8th, so it can sort of see the evolution from the protests, from the peaceful sort of marches and protests into what eventually became this. And I'd say this was the accumulation of the protesters' feelings and that. Um, I feel like this protest, well, the protest it started off good, but I feel like bad actors went into it, and I'll cover that later if you want me to. Leave a comment if you want me to. But you saw these real concerning issues, and then it's almost like these communist anarchist people took over the protest. Really it was a really strange event where it was just this completely like it started off the like trying to reform the police, reform bits of the government, and it started off entirely peaceful by working class black people, and then it almost evolved into middle upper class white people, young white people who are these weird anarchist people who are in some instances directly the harming the working class black people. And I'd say this is a like sort of an accumulation of this this the sort of protest and all that evolved into. It ended July 1st, 2020, when the zone was cleared. Um, I think it lasted a bit longer with that because it was so hard for them to clear out the police. But that's when it officially ended. Yeah. Um, what was this zone? Um, like it was a. We'll go into that later. But how does this even like sort of happen? It it started as I'd explained with sort of it was sort of a hotspot, Capitol Hill, for protests. It was like Seattle's main. Well, it was like, and I think it probably will be. I don't know. It was the main sort of place for these protests. You had the 1999 World Trade Occupation protests, um, Occupy Seattle, and then you have you've had other protests. Um, yeah. The zone it was formed in like a pretty weird way. The best way to explain it was the protests were normal sort of protests with the anarchist flags. They were quite sometimes they could be quite kind of violent, and the police what the police done is that they had this incident where apparently by Wikipedia a child got sprayed in the face, and the the police made a mistake and they didn't let the like sort of medics treat the child. But it was pepper spray, but it was the issue was is that they were using just um common police tactics when a lot of the people who were protesting were kids, um, and that made the public look sort of down very much at the police and sort of like when I say the public, I mean sort of like 60-year-olds like your granddad, your nan, um, because you don't want to see your kid getting getting a flashbang in the face. So basically, the children were getting pushed out with police tactics, and then the mayor, Jenny Durkin, um, and the Seattle Police Department chief announced a 30-day ban on the use of tear gas because it was probably affecting your granddad, like sort of like people in the 60s, and that probably affected them pretty badly because you don't want to see like your grandson or whatever, your granddaughter getting like pelted with like tear gas. So on June the 7th, this is the really this is a really confusing sort of thing that the mayor Jenny Durkin and the chief agreed to do. What they did agreed to do, and this was just I'm sorry, this was just the most stupid thing ever. Where the protests were happening, they had this police station, and it was sort of the hub for all of the area's policing. And instead of trying to like I don't know calm it calm it down in a more peaceful way to not like sort of to because most of the protesters were quite young or to like just use tear gas. The police instead, and this was the choice of the mayor, like I said before, and the Seattle Police Department's chief decided, and this is just insane. They decided to evacuate the East Precinct, and what the heck? Like that is just not cool. Like they they left like working class people who are often like targeted quite badly by like robbers. They left them to fend for themselves. Like that is so mean. I think that's the story of this of this like event that happened. That even though the anarchists, these Marxist kids, they 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 like they were not in the right with this protest, with like this organized sort of violent protest. It was getting they were destroying stuff, they were robbing people. It was not peaceful. But the mayor and the chief of the police deciding to just abandon the regular people who weren't even like involved in any of this, the people who just were living their normal lives, trying to earn a bit of money to support their families and them. They just got abandoned by the police and the mayor for like the next 3 weeks. Honestly, it's disgusting. It disgusts me so much that happened. So why did they do it? They done it to de-escalate the situation and rebuild trust. But the issue is, for most working class people, like I said before, with robberies and that, the police is the police is very useful. I I have lived near some pre- pretty deprived areas where there's no police. I can tell you something. Walking around a place where there's no police officers is a lot scarier than what even if it even if it looks better and look is a bit more richer than a place where there's tons of police officers but even more deprived. Because the issue is with a place that's like less deprived, like that's less deprived than a place that's not, but it's got less police officers. Is that you don't know if you're gonna walk down like an alley and not get stabbed. Like that's just how it goes. That is just how it goes when you're in those areas. So like police having more police officers, it helps just with everything. It helps make the locals feel safer. The locals who live there, who are working class, by the way. It helps the shopkeepers live better, and ultimately, having police in the area, it allows for these working class people. It allows for their community. Not having police means gangs, stabbings. It doesn't matter what race you are. Not having police means someone's gonna get robbed, and that's what happened. And we'll cover this later, but that's exactly what happened. Where because there were no police, eventually someone took over. But we'll cover that later. We'll cover that later. We're going on to part two. Part two is what it was like. Just wait for a sec. We're having technical difficulties. So, whilst these technical difficulties are happening, yeah, it's just it sucked. We'll go into it more, but it's just it's so sad. I feel so bad for the locals, and especially because this was a black area. Most of the locals that were harmed were like black working class people. Anyway, see you in part two. This is the end of part one. Okay, we are back. We are back. I just had to take a bit of a water break. So this is part two. Part one was sort of the introduction to how it happened. This is part two. What occurred in this set? What happened? Like so on June the 11th, the all cops had gone. They'd vanished, and according to the governor of Washington, I'm I'm gonna be honest, this is a lie. This is by J. Inslee. The zone was unpermitted but largely peaceful. There's some BS promise by the police to that they'll respond to calls, but when there's no police in the area, how are you meant to respond to calls? The next day, um, rapes, robberies, and basically all the different types of very disgusting, violent acts were happening in the area. But because the police had vanished, and this sounds mental, but the chief told the police, and they'd come to like some agreement, the chief of police and the mayor, not to walk into this area. They couldn't respond to the calls. What? So looting became a big issue in this area. A lot of people interviewed by Vox that had actually participated in these protests, like probably like the more peaceful people, I'd say the more sort of less crazy people, they said that they just didn't feel safe at night because all the police had been removed. Sorry, I didn't feel too well.